If you're here right now, you might be feeling the heavy weight of suffering, and perhaps you've tried everything you can to escape it, to push it away, to find relief, but nothing seems to have worked. So let me share with you something profound. Your suffering doesn't need to carry the burden of being removed. Because liberating yourself from suffering doesn't come from fighting it. In fact, the harder you fight, the stronger its grip. Every effort to push suffering away is like pouring fuel onto your fire, which intensifies the flames, and you cannot defeat suffering merely by resisting it. Resistance itself is the essence of suffering. Understand this. Suffering arises from our deep, almost reflexive desire to reject what is happening in our experience. So it is born from resistance, from the mental habit of saying no to life as it unfolds. How can rejecting suffering ever free you from it? Well, it can't. The only way forward is to stop the struggle, to release the need to fix or to remove it. For much of my life, I have been caught in this endless battle, believing that suffering was a problem that I had to solve, but eventually discovering something that changed everything for myself, and that is that suffering is not the enemy. In fact, suffering, it almost has a sacred role. It's the gateway to the truth, a relentless pointer directing us towards our true nature. When I shifted my focus from trying to eradicate suffering to instead exploring the deeper truth of my own experience, that's when something incredible happened, because the need to resist began to dissolve. And I stopped asking myself, how do I end this pain? And instead asked, what is this pain truly made of? What is this pain truly showing me? And this shift, it purified my intentions. I wasn't running from suffering anymore. I was turning towards it, being curious, being open. And in doing so, suffering begins to lose the grip that it had on you. And it wasn't that the experience of discomfort just disappeared overnight. It was that the meaning I gave to suffering had completely transformed. When suffering stops being a problem, it ceases to feel like suffering. Let's dive a bit deeper into this. Suffering becomes unbearable when we overlay it with judgment. When we label it as wrong or unwanted, we fuel it with the desperate desire to make it vanish. But when we allow suffering to simply be, without attaching to it, we start to see it for what it truly is, a transient wave in the vast ocean of our entire being. So here's a radical invitation. Just stop trying to remove your suffering and instead get curious. Ask yourself, what is this discomfort really made of? What am I resisting? You may discover that it isn't the pain itself that causes you anguish, but it's your relationship to it. The mental stories, the judgments, these layers of resistance. And the moment that you stop running from suffering and start turning toward it with acceptance, this is when something magical happens. It's like looking for the shadows in your vision only to realize they disappear the moment you truly focus on them. Suffering begins to unravel, and not because you've defeated it, but because you've stopped feeding it. Many people embark on the spiritual path thinking it will help them to escape this suffering. They seek this enlightenment as a cop-out or a way out, and they hope to trade pain for eternal bliss. But this is just another form of resistance, another way the mind tricks us into perpetuating the cycle. The truth is, liberation isn't about escaping suffering. It's about seeing through it. Seeing right through it. It's about realizing that suffering has no inherent power over you unless that you give it that power. You don't need to do anything to make it disappear. Your only task is to let go of the fight, to give yourself the freedom to experience whatever arises fully. And yes, this sounds paradoxical, but it's the key. Freedom comes when you stop needing freedom from suffering. When you allow yourself to suffer without resistance, the suffering transforms. The chains dissolve because you no longer hold them so tight. So if you're here and you're feeling overwhelmed and desperate for relief, take this as your permission to stop trying so hard. Stop striving to fix or escape what you're feeling, and instead turn towards it and simply observe. Allow yourself the freedom to suffer without judgment, without resistance. Grant yourself this freedom entirely. Ask yourself, what happens if I let suffering be here as long as it needs to be here? Explore this fully and see what remains of your suffering. What you may find is a very surprising lightness, a profound sense of peace that arises when you no longer reject your experience. If you're ready to dive deeper into this process of what I call the ultimate forgiveness, a forgiveness that isn't about letting go of wrongs, but about total acceptance of what is, then I invite you to join my free community. Here you'll find guidance and support in navigating this journey of surrender and self-discovery. So you can click the link in the description to join and take the next step toward freedom. Not freedom from suffering, but freedom in suffering. Blessings.